Ecuadorians are outraged over the government's response to COVID-19 deaths. Italy extends lockdown until April 13th as coronavirus death toll claims more than 13,000 lives. And the COP26 UN Climate Summit set to take place in Scotland in November has been postponed due to the coronavirus crisis. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is from the south. In Ecuador, social organizations from the province of Guayas have condemned the concealment of the real number of victims of the novel coronavirus. Minister of Government Maria Paula Romo admitted on Tuesday that the collection of victims' bodies in Guayaquil has become difficult. According to her estimation, 100 bodies were collected between March 24th and 26th alone, which is clearly more than the 93 deaths officially reported on April 1st. Social organizations have called on the WHO and the international community to undertake inspections and provide aid. As of Wednesday, Ecuador reported over 2,700 COVID-19 cases, with Guayas province registering more than 70% of the cases and deaths. The mayor of Guayaquil has said that refrigerator containers are being sent to a local hospital to store bodies of COVID-19 victims following a global outrage on social media over bodies allegedly being left on the streets for a long period of time.
Today, the first of the 4 large refrigerated containers arrived to deposit the bodies of the people who lost their lives inside the hospitals or who also lost their lives in their homes. The first was already placed in the Monte Hospital Sinaí, and the other 3, which will arrive this week, will be placed in the hospitals selected by the health minister.
Ecuador has 2,758 cases of COVID-19 as of Wednesday, and according to official statistics, at least 98 people have died from the virus. Our correspondent, Denise Herrera, has more.
Ecuadorian authorities have reported a new increase in the cases of coronavirus in the country. Ecuador has now 2,748 cases of coronavirus and 93 deaths. Are still Guayaquil City, the main city affected by the coronavirus crisis. The people are still denouncing in social media that they don't know what to do with the bodies of their relatives. According to the government, they are taking all the measures to prevent this sanitary crisis in the province of Guayas. But we can see in social media, people are saying that that information is not true. Also, Quito City are taking measures to prevent the spread of the coronavirus crisis. As you can see behind me, the authorities of Quito City are taking all the preventive measures. They are still continuing with the controls that the citizens have to follow in order to respect the measures, the preventive measures against the coronavirus situation. According to the government, Guayaquil City has 60 deaths. But people in social media are denouncing that that information is not true. They are talking also to other number of deaths in the province of Guayas. But people in Ecuador, Ecuadorian people are still following these measures. The authorities said that probably in the coming days, these cases of coronavirus will reduce as the authorities hope.
We thank Denise Herrera for that report, and we've just received information last minute that only in the province of Guayas, 63 people have died, making it more than 70% of the COVID-19 cases. Moving on, Chile is seeing a rise in layoffs for people who are under quarantine, a situation that appears to have the support of the government, which has tried to make workers pay for the crisis.
In the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, Chileans are forced to gather outside municipal buildings to pay for transit permits and car insurance. Congress had promised a law to push back the payment dates, but the text needed to be vetoed by the president, delaying it.
They have lied to us so much. How can we ever believe them again?
Authorities even defend a decree that authorizes companies to not pay workers' salaries during the quarantine.
The idea is to promote work stability and to prevent the suspension of activities. That is why we've allowed both sides to find alternative measures to accomplish this.
Alternative measures that turn into threats for employees. But what lies behind the decree that harms workers?
The decree creates uncertainty because if a company closes, it will not be forced to pay back salaries. And the government has pushed for a law so that workers pay for the time companies remain closed from their severance fund.
It's so-called the COVID law, and it's moving ahead in Congress under the guise of safeguarding workers' salaries.
This is part of the neoliberal way of thinking of the state, which only cares to help private companies.
The so-called COVID law is made to look like it will benefit the people who it's actually said to hurt.
This is where the project to temporarily suspend contracts comes in. It allows workers to pay the rent, the bosses to stay afloat, and maybe allow the company to rebound in Q2.
This is an evil law, and what's worse is that the decree can be ignored by the courts, but if it's a law, they will have to enforce it.
Once again, private companies are untouchable.
On Tuesday, Brazil has recorded its largest increase in coronavirus cases since the pandemic was first detected in the country. Our correspondent, Brian Muir, has more.
Yesterday, Brazil registered its largest growth in coronavirus cases and deaths since the pandemic first arrived in Brazil. There were 1,138 new cases registered and 42 deaths, bringing the death toll of confirmed deaths to 201. Keeping in mind that due to the massive increase of hospitalizations for pneumonia and severe respiratory problems, public health officials from Fiocruz Institute are saying that they believe the real death and infection numbers are as much as 10 times higher than the official statistics. As Bolsonaro's attempt to get people to come out onto the streets and to end the lockdowns has failed, he's becoming more and more isolated. Supreme Court Justice Marcos Aurelio Neto issued an order to the Attorney General's office demanding that Bolsonaro be removed from office for 180 days because he's broken the law. He's disobeyed guidelines from the World Health Organization. Now, as the state's attorney, as an ally of Bolsonaro, it's hard to tell what is really going to happen from that. But the pressure is mounting as every night more and more people are banging pots and pans on the streets from their balconies, from their windows in cities across Brazil every time he comes on the air to make an official pronouncement against coronavirus. And as 40% of the coronavirus cases are in Sao Paulo, as the city braces for an oncoming expansion of infections and deaths by building new field hospitals, Mayor Bruno Cova says if he were to listen to President Bolsonaro's advice about ending the lockdowns, Sao Paulo would explode just like Milan did.
We thank Brian Muir for that report. Staying in Brazil, it's been 56 years since the military coup that ousted President Jango Goulart and led to a 21-year dictatorship. Even under quarantine, Brazilians continue the call for justice for the victims.
The traditional walk of silence that looks back on the crimes committed during the military dictatorship could not be done this year due to the ongoing quarantine in response to the novel coronavirus. But social organizations have called on people to make the demand for justice and truth from their windows.
Our memory cannot be in quarantine. When it starts to fade, it comes back stronger. If it shrinks, it does so to gain strength and be reborn. When doors are closed, our memory finds a way.
The process that was started by the Truth Commission during the government of Dilma Rousseff was eventually halted. The crimes committed by the army were left in impunity.
Until this day, the Supreme Court insists on not giving a ruling on the amnesty's law reinterpretation. Our country has already been condemned by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights for the impunity.
Eugenia Gonzaga was dismissed by the Bolsonaro government and the special commission she led, which looked into the missing and dead during the dictatorship. was put under the leadership of people who supported that regime. The families of victims are relieving their pain after the government prohibited that death certificates be issued.
The current government is the reflection and the result of a lack of justice. When Jair Bolsonaro was a lawmaker and I headed to the Truth Commission, I started a process against him for his support of torturers, which didn't get far. He was elected president as he lauded the dictatorship, supporting torture and death. And now we have to be led by a government that has zero compromise with human rights.
At the moment, Bolsonaro faces the worst crisis of his administration. His defense of the economy, about people's lives, cost him the support of allied governors and lawmakers, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread in the nation.
We'll be right back, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez has thanked the various countries around the world that have called for an end to the U.S. blockade against Cuba. He took to Twitter to say that the blockade is a genocidal policy causing severe economic and humanitarian damages to our country. The Secretary General of the Organization of American States recently called for coercive unilateral measures against various countries to be lifted in order to guarantee their access to food and medicine amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The Cuban ambassador to China has heavily denounced that a shipment of Chinese aid was blocked from reaching Havana due to U.S. sanctions. In a statement on the embassy's website, Cuban Ambassador Carlos Miguel Pereira described how the U.S. company hired by Chinese tycoon Jack Ma to deliver a shipment of masks and COVID-19 test kits to Cuba had backed out last minute due to U.S. regulations described in the Helms-Burton Act. Jack Ma, who is the founder of tech company Alibaba, has managed to deliver tons of medical aid to more than 50 countries, including the U.S. Trinidad and Tobago has recorded its 5th COVID-19 related death. This Wednesday morning, the Ministry of Health issued an update noting that the number of fatalities rose by 1. So far, 89 people tested positive for the virus, with 49 being citizens who recently returned from a cruise. 1 person has recovered. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley said his government is not planning to impose a total lockdown on the country yet, but are looking for other preventive measures to contain the spread of the virus.
We have been taking steps of interventions, steps of exhortation, based on what advice we got, the nature of the problem, and based on the advice we determine what is the most appropriate state response. And that's where we're at. What I just said is that if the situation is deemed to be that we need to be more interventionist, and that intervention would put us in a better situation, then the government will have no difficulty in doing it. But last time I was here, I spoke at length about this whole question about the demand for a lockdown. And I thought I went into detail as to what that really means if we actually do that. For example, in our neighboring territory of Grenada, there's a 24-hour, 7-day curfew. Any government could do that if you wish, but it might suit that situation. Question is that what is best for us under our circumstances? When we get to that bridge, you'll be the first to know.
Prime Minister Rowley also defended his recent meeting with Venezuela's vice president after concerns were raised about it at a media conference earlier on Wednesday.
The meeting that I had with the vice president of Venezuela had absolutely nothing to do with the Maduro United States criminal development. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, it didn't come up. And let me just say one more thing, because I see there are those who believe that there's something here to make Janjat over. When, as Prime Minister, I meet with the Queen of England, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the President of Ghana, or the Vice President of Venezuela. I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to understand that it is all in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
With 13 confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus in St. Lucia and suspicious of community spread, the Prime Minister has announced a 24-hour shutdown beginning this Wednesday.
After discussions with my cabinet colleagues and also with the relevant Ministry of Health directors, we have determined at this point that we have to expand our shutdown of the country. So as of 5 a.m. tomorrow, every person shall remain confined to their place of residence, inclusive of their personal yards. In essence, we're going to put into effect a 24-hour curfew. A person can only leave their place of residence upon written authorization by NEMO, inclusive of essential services. People are not permitted to go to the beach, go for a walk, or to visit their neighbor. People will only be allowed to leave their place of residence for medical emergencies.
Senegal has announced that the former president of the French football club, Marseille, Pape Diouf, has died aged 68 after contracting coronavirus. The Senegalese was president between 2005 and 2009 when Marseille reached 2 French Cup finals.
Yesterday, Tuesday, March 31st, 2020, at 7:43 p.m., Senegal registered its first case of death related to COVID-19 in the person of Mr. Mababa Diouf, better known as Pape Diouf, on behalf of the Minister of Health and Social Action, currently meeting in the Council of Ministers, and on behalf of the President of the Republic, His Excellency Macky Sall, the government and the people of Senegal, I extend my heartfelt condolences to his family, loved ones, and the entire nation.
Following the announcement of Pape Diouf's death, tributes from supporters of the club immediately started to pour in.
We supporters of Olympique de Marseille in Senegal have lost a great man. Not only was Pape Diouf Senegalese, but on top of that, he was the first black president of an elite club from the Big Five championships. Pape Diouf was a great example for us. He was also a reference, because he was the perfect example of a son of Senegal who succeeded, who left for Europe to establish himself in journalism, in his work as a player's agent, and also in his management of Olympique de Marseille.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Italy has extended its economically crippling lockdown until April 13th to help curb the coronavirus infections that have claimed more than 13,000 lives.
This additional effort that I am asking you to undertake will allow us to begin to assess a perspective with the recommendation from our experts of the Scientific Technical Committee. As soon as the data consolidate, when the board of experts will allow us to do so, we will start planning a relaxation of the measures. I cannot tell you, however, that it will be on the 14th of April, because we are not able to know. When we have more data, evaluating what will happen with the epidemiological curve in the next few days, in the next 2 weeks, we will obviously begin to consider the prospect of entering Phase 2. Phase 2 is to coexist with the virus, and then take measures, let's say, that will slowly lead to relaxing the lockdown, and then enter into Phase 3, that is the exit from the emergency phase.
Spain has the world's second highest death toll following Italy after the COVID-19 virus claimed a record 864 lives in 24 hours, bringing the total to more than 9,000. This while confirmed cases have surpassed 100,000.
We have a total of 9,053 people who have died from the novel coronavirus, with 864 new deaths in the last 24 hours. Based on reports from autonomous communities, the cumulative number of confirmed cases stand at 102,136. Of these, 5,872 patients have been admitted or are still in the ICU. This is also a cumulative figure, and in general, what we can say is that the increase in cases since yesterday is about 8%, which tells us that we are still working to stabilize the pandemic.
Turkey has sent a shipment of masks, protective suits, goggles, and disinfectants to Italy and Spain to help the countries combat the new coronavirus outbreak. As a token of solidarity, Turkey also wrote the following words on the crates: "There is hope after despair and many suns after darkness." The French government has announced that 3.6 million employees have applied for partial unemployment. If granted, this means that the state will pay 70% of their wages for hours that employees are furloughed during the COVID-19 pandemic.
En ce qui concerne le chômage partiel,
337,000 companies have applied, the vast majority of which are small businesses. And these applications concern 3.6 million employees. So the protective partial unemployment system that we have put in place to avoid redundancies and to prepare for the recovery by protecting jobs and skills is on the rise. And I think we can be proud to have such a protective system in France. We want to save jobs, allow for skills to be retained, and therefore also prepare the next generation of workers after the health crisis.
The coronavirus death toll in Iran has passed 3,000 as President Hassan Rouhani accused the Trump administration of missing a, quote, historic opportunity to lift sanctions.
This was a good time. This was an opportunity for Americans to apologize for their wrong actions. This was a human issue, and no one would have reproached them for backing off. This was the best historic opportunity for the Americans to come back from the wrong path they have chosen, and to tell the Iranian nation, for just once, that we are not against the Iranian people.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has gone into self-isolation after meeting last week with a doctor who later tested positive for COVID-19.
The situation in the country is getting more difficult, and the situation around coronavirus in the world is very difficult. 883,000 people have already become infected, and on the territory of Russia, according to the latest data that I have, there are 2,777 cases of the disease.
The COP26 climate conference set to take place in Glasgow, Scotland, later this year has been postponed due to the coronavirus crisis. In a Twitter post, Alok Sharma, Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, said a new date would be soon set for climate summit. He added, "The world is facing an unprecedented global challenge and countries are rightly focusing on fighting the COVID-19. Due to this, COP26 has been postponed." The Scottish event campus where the COP26 was to be held is currently being turned into a COVID-19 emergency hospital. China has announced it has more than 1,300 asymptomatic COVID-19 cases. This is the first time China has released such data as public concern grows over people who have been tested positive but are showing no symptoms. The National Health Commission said 1,367 asymptomatic patients are under medical monitoring, with 130 new cases added in the next 24 hours. Experts agree that asymptomatic patients are likely to be infectious, but their infection rate is still being debated. But Chinese respiratory expert Zhong Nanshan said that asymptomatic carriers could potentially infect 3 to 3.5 people each. An Afghan government delegation has met with the Taliban for the first time to discuss a prisoner swap aimed at kickstarting a peace process. The two sides held direct negotiations in Kabul about the release of Afghan National Defense and Security Force personnel as well as Taliban prisoners. The United States signed a deal with the Taliban in February that promised the withdrawal of U.S. and foreign troops from Afghanistan by July next year if the Taliban starts talks with the Afghan government. But the deal required the government, which didn't sign the deal, to free 5,000 Taliban prisoners and for the group to release 1,000 pro-government prisoners in return.
A technical team of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan hosted Taliban representatives in Kabul yesterday. The issues of the prisoners' release were discussed in this face-to-face meeting, and it was decided that the discussions continue today. The ICRC was present as observers in yesterday's meeting.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesferenglish.net. And remember, you can find us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.